Where, where have all the flowers gone? The poignant question posed in Pete Seeger's classic song by the same title presents an image of heartbreaking loss. When flowers can no longer be found, a kind of hope and beauty has left the scene. Seeger's song is a call for peace, a call made more powerful by the song's focusing our attention on the losses that have come, that will continue to come, so long as we persevere in our war-making ways. The first flower communion happened in between world wars, when peace was momentarily present and losing peace was all too easy to imagine. Norbert Čapek, minister of Unitarian Church in Prague, sought to widen the circle of his community and awaken the possibilities for drawing that circle wider. With Christian roots, his congregants were familiar with the ritual of communion, the words that spoke of being broken in order to be available to others, of a covenant symbolized by wine that was shared. Čapek wondered if the complex circumstances of the time might call for a reimagining of communion as a way of reminding his congregants that opening the circle of the church to others was always needed, that the ugly messages about outsiders and unbelievers, which sought to cast certain persons as unworthy even to live, were everywhere and always untrue. The same messages we hear on all sides today. So much as we did this morning, Čapek invited the people of his church to come to worship with flowers. Once there, all the flowers were collected, then redistributed as each person was instructed to take a different flower home. Just as congregants ate bread and drank wine to symbolize their being gathered into one body of believer, sharing their flowers with one another showed them that all were gathered in one community, each utterly different from the others, each beautiful individually, all the flowers even more beautiful when gathered into a bouquet. And so every spring, UU churches celebrate Čapek's original ritual in a flower communion and have done so for this year, 100 years. Words about inclusion and diversity, individuality and community, the beauty of coming together, are usually spoken as part of flower communion. This morning, we mark flower communion within a larger climate where flowers of any sort that herald positive change and new possibility seem harder than ever to find. Awakening, the theme of our worship services this month, feels strained. Who wants to be awake these days? When we're surrounded by so many shadows, when war in the Ukraine and shootings in our communities continue without end, who wants to be awake when voices around the country are forcefully at work to limit even further the few reproductive rights that remain, or end them entirely, all the while being certain to protect gun rights? Who wants to be awake for messages about not saying gay and denying care to trans youth and stomping out flowers of inclusion wherever they might bloom? Who wants to be awake? The poignant question of Seeger's song, asking, "Where have all the flowers gone?" sounds even louder now. As our congregation concludes this transitional year with the prospect of another year of change made more complicated without full-time ministerial presence, the flowers of welcome and celebration feel a bit threatened. And we celebrate flower communion today on the eve of Juneteenth, a holiday that came later than it should have because the message of freedom was withheld. Today we watch as that freedom remains so contingent, so diminished, as the forces who would deny inclusion to all tirelessly work against it. A single flower looks awfully small against such forces. And yet we have accomplished so much together this year, opened up a host of new possibilities for our shared life in this congregation, and we're surrounded in this season with ceremonies like graduations and weddings and pride celebrations that remind us of how much life goes on. Last Sunday, we passed the 8th principle, committing ourselves unequivocally to widening the circle by dismantling within ourselves, within our congregation, within our community, within the world, all that denies the beauty of variety and difference. And on a Sunday when this sanctuary is filled with flowers, that beauty reminds us of all that is already present, which we sometimes cannot see because we're so consumed with worries and distractions and fears for the future. Čapek was ultimately imprisoned by the Nazis and executed. A victim of a particular vision of exclusion that was going to stop at nothing to eliminate anyone who had been identified as being different. But his vision, Čapek's vision of a world where differences were not simply tolerated, not simply acknowledged, not simply allowed to exist undisturbed, but actually celebrated as beautiful, did not end. The ritual flower communion remained and grew, and now it's become a standard part of Unitarian Universalist life. There seems to be a kind of spiritual law that if someone, just one of us, will take just a single step in the direction of welcome and love, all kinds of unexpected forces in the situation, in the larger universe, can then come into play and make that small step the beginning of a widening in the walls of exclusion to break them down so that others can come in. No matter how the course of any of our lives has run, each one of us sometimes has found ourselves the one who was excluded, the stranger nobody talked to, the outsider nobody welcomed. Remember how that felt? Remember when you kept looking around hoping somebody would catch your eye, wave you over, walk up to you, take your hand? Did you finally get that welcome? Or did you stand there all by yourself until you grew tired of standing and walked away? Your hope smaller than it had been, your heart more locked away than it had been. Maybe this morning you still find yourself in the company of those who are excluded. If so, can this congregation become the community who at last brings you inside the circle? Or maybe this morning you're one of those already within the circle. If so, can you extend a hand to draw one of those standing on the margins closer? Let them know that you, at least you, will not be one to shut them out. This is a weekend filled with reminders of freedom won, reminders of freedom that was won only to be taken away, reminders of freedom that has not yet come. We celebrate, we lament, we double down our commitment to keep working, to show up. Because freedom does not simply happen, no matter how pretty the words we say about it. And as recent years have shown us, freedom can be lost. We need a wider circle more than ever. So as you leave the sanctuary this morning, you've got your flower that you received earlier. A cut flower remains viable for maybe 3 days, not much time. So you have 3 days to do something with that flower, other than just take it home, stick it in a vase, put it on the kitchen table, and forget about it. Instead, try carrying our flower communion a bit further than this sanctuary. Take the flower away from church with you, but don't take it home. Take it somewhere else in your life. Take it to a family member's home, your workplace, somewhere in the neighborhood, on the lawn of another church, somewhere that has not yet experienced the opening and welcome and celebration of differences that the flowers represent for us today. Leave your flower there. Lay it down quietly, stick it in a vase if there's one nearby, and leave it there. Its presence marks one more small place in this world where flowers of inclusion may yet bloom. And maybe let your leaving of the flower in a place that is presently locked up tight inspire you to take some other actions beyond just placing your flower somewhere. Actions small or large, one-time or ongoing, actions that are your personal, individual contribution to widening the circle of affirmation and love. Where have all the flowers gone? Just as the flowers of Chopic's first communion spread over time, far and wide, may our set of flowers this morning go so many more places. Go to places we never imagined, far and wide. Go out with their message that each one of us, each one everywhere, is different and wonderful and blessed. May it be so. Amen.